Hello everyone, this is Ola. In this video, I'll cover the functional nervous system. Let's first have a general idea about the two primary divisions of the nervous system, the sensory and the motor. The sensory nervous system is also called afferent, and here the signal arrives to the central nervous system to be processed. The sensory nervous system can be somatic sensory when the sensation primarily comes from the skin, like somebody touching the skin. This is somatic sensation. Or visceral sensory when the sensation comes from internal organs or viscera. For example, if you have a heavy meal and you feel that your stomach is full, this is a visceral sensation. If the urinary bladder is full of urine and you have the urge to go to the restroom, this is also visceral sensation. The motor nervous system is also called efferent, and here the signal exits the central nervous system to produce an action. Now, the somatic sensation from the skin, visceral sensations from internal organs, they have exactly the same pathway. So here is a pain sensation coming from the skin and visceral pain coming from the appendix due to inflammation of the appendix, which is appendicitis. Both pain, somatic sensation, and visceral pain go the same pathway. So they will go with the afferent nerve to end at the sensory cell bodies of the posterior root ganglion, which is the first order neuron. From the sensory cell bodies of the posterior root ganglion, the signal goes with the posterior root, which is purely sensory, to end at the sensory cell bodies of the posterior horn of the spinal cord, which is the second order neuron. The axons from the sensory cell bodies of the posterior horn cross to the opposite side of the spinal cord to finally arrive at the opposite cerebral hemisphere. So the sensory signal goes up along the ascending tract to end at the cell bodies in the thalamus or the third order neurons. And from the thalamus, the signal goes to the final destination, which is the post-central gyrus. Remember that the thalamus is the sensory gate for every sensation except smell. So this touch or this pain from the skin or pain from the appendix, they have to take a permission from the thalamus before proceeding to their final destination in the post-central gyrus. The motor nervous system or the efferent nervous system can be somatic motor, which is voluntary. The signal goes to move our skeletal muscles. So SM, somatic motor, is for SM, skeletal muscles, and this is under our control. It can be also a visceral motor or autonomic nervous system, and here an action happens involuntary. We do not control it. The visceral motor can be parasympathetic if you are in relaxation mode or sympathetic during stressful situation. Now, let's go with the somatic motor system where the signal goes to our skeletal muscles. So the signal begins from the primary motor cortex, which is a precentral gyrus. It has the upper motor neurons. From the cell bodies of the upper motor neurons, the signal goes down and then cross to the opposite side to arrive at the somatic motor cell bodies in the anterior horn of the spinal cord. They are also called lower motor neurons. From the somatic motor cell bodies in the anterior horn of the spinal cord, the signal goes with the anterior root, which is purely motor, and then it goes with the efferent nerve to move our skeletal muscles. The visceral motor system is not under our control, and this can be sympathetic in case of a stressful situation. So sympathetic works during stress. We call that also the fight or flight system. The sympathetic nervous system is thoracolumbar in location. So the signal begins from the lateral horn, uh, beginning from thoracic 1 down to lumbar 2. So it is thoracolumbar. The parasympathetic nervous system is the system that works during relaxation times. We call it also the resting and digesting system. Like you are relaxing, having your popcorn, watching your favorite show. And here, the parasympathetic nervous system is going to be the system that is dominating. The parasympathetic nervous system is also called craniosacral. Cranial because we have the four cranial nerves associated with the parasympathetic nervous system beginning from the brainstem. And we discussed those in the previous video. They are cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, and 10, and they originate from the brainstem. Sacral because we have a portion of the parasympathetic nervous system that originates from the lateral horn of the sacral segments of the spinal cord. So the sympathetic nervous system is thoracolumbar and the parasympathetic is craniosacral. The visceral motor system, regardless sympathetic or parasympathetic, has presynaptic neurons that are located inside the central nervous system. From them, the signal goes to the postsynaptic neurons outside of the central nervous system. And from the postsynaptic neurons, the signal goes to the final organ, to the target organ to produce an action. The sympathetic nervous system, which is the thoracolumbar system working during a stressful situation. So here the signal begins from the lateral horn of the thoracic segments beginning from T1 down to lumbar 2. That's why it is thoracolumbar system. From the presynaptic sympathetic neurons in the lateral horn, the signal goes to stimulate the postsynaptic sympathetic neurons. They are outside the central nervous system. From the postsynaptic sympathetic neurons, the signal goes to our organs to produce an action that happens during stress. For example, the pupil of the eye will be dilated during sympathetic nervous system activity. Salivation is going to be inhibited from the salivary glands. The heart rate speeds up. If we are stressed, usually our heart rate increases. And the digestion is going to be stopped. There is no time to digest food. Actually, the blood goes to the skeletal muscles if you are exercising, if you are fighting. So the digestion is going to be stopped, as well as the peristalsis or the movement of the gastrointestinal canal. The parasympathetic nervous system or craniosacral system is the system that works during the relaxation times. It is craniosacral. Let's discuss the cranial part. The signal begins from the brainstem that has the presynaptic parasympathetic neurons. From them, we have four cranial nerves originate, and they are the cranial nerves associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. They are three oculomotor, seven facial, nine glossopharyngeal nerve, and 10, which is the vagus nerve. Now, along these four cranial nerves, the signal goes to the postsynaptic parasympathetic neurons. And then from the postsynaptic parasympathetic neurons, the signal goes to do an action. So here it goes to do a constriction of the pupil, and this is cranial nerve number 3, oculomotor. From the facial, the signal goes to stimulate salivation from two salivary glands, the submandibular salivary gland and the sublingual salivary glands. From the glossopharyngeal nerve, the signal goes to stimulate the parotid gland and to induce salivation. Then from cranial nerve number 10, the vagus, which is a major parasympathetic nerve, the signal goes to the heart, so it slows down the heart rate. It goes to the digestive system to help with the digestive processes and peristalsis, which is movement of the food downstream the digestive canal. The parasympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic signal from the vagus end at the distal third of the transverse colon. So the distal part of the large intestine is not supplied by the vagus. So here is the large intestine. This is the ascending colon, and then transverse. Here is the end of the vagus at the distal two-thirds of the transverse colon. Then the last third of the transverse colon, descending sigmoid colon, and upper rectum. This part of the large intestine is not supplied with the vagus. It takes the signals from the sacral portions of the spinal cord. So here are the presynaptic parasympathetic neurons coming from the lateral horn of the sacral segments. And then the signal goes to the postsynaptic parasympathetic neurons to do an action. So here it's gonna do peristalsis of the large intestine to help with defecation. The urinary bladder muscle, which is the detrusor muscle, is gonna be stimulated, and this helps with urination. Also, the sacral segments of the spinal cord are responsible for penis erection during sexual activity.